You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Time for the Hamilton Corner with today's guest host, Stacey Washington.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio
and Urban Family Talk.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
The Korean people were going through the time of grave economic challenges during and following the Korean War in the early 1950s. And Korea was one of the poorest nations in the world at that time. But the gospel of Jesus Christ offered the Korean people a great hope and faith and love. So as they worked so hard for better living, they needed faith in the Almighty God, hope for the future, and the love of God in their hearts. So Christian faith provided what they really needed. In 1973, Billy Graham Evangelist Crusade in Seoul, when they had about 1 million people, the largest gathering ever, this Evangelist Crusade triggered, I think, the flame of faith in the people. 1 million people gathered every night, and the message, his messages raised hope for the people. And all-out evangelistic effort fanned the flame into a wildfire for the following 2 decades. Churches growing in certain years as high as 13.5 annually. However, today the growth considerably slowed down after rapid growth, and that's where we are now. Well, we have now about 27,000 Korean missionaries in 175 countries around the world.
Welcome to the Hamilton Corner. I'm Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk, and it's my pleasure to be with you guys today to fill in for Abraham, who is out of town, and it's always a pleasure to get to come in and fill in for him and work with his producers and get to be in his chair and keep it warm for him until he gets back. So welcome to the show. We have a wonderful program for you. We have the audio that you just heard, Sang-Bok David Kim, the chancellor of a South Korean evangelical graduate school named the Torch Trinity Graduate University. He's describing the rise of Christianity in South Korea, and this article is over at ChristianityToday.com. It's CT, the big red CT, ChristianityToday.com. And their piece is what South Korean Christians want for North Korea. Now, he's describing the growth of Christianity and how strong the faith is there, and how it came after the Korean War when their country was destitute and they had so little, and they began to believe in Jesus Christ. And so the speaker, Sang-Bok David Kim, actually was talking to producer Morgan Lee and editor-in-chief Mark Ghali, and he has this ambitious North Korea church planting plan. And the South Korean church has welcomed refugees from the North, and they're really praying for the opportunity of normalized relations between the North and the South so that they can spread Christianity into the North. And so this is the ambitious, just outsized effort that they have. They're praying over it. They're working on it. They're hoping for it. All of their hope is in it, and they're excited about it. And they're just waiting on God to answer their prayer to open relations between it's the one people group, the Koreans, so that they can minister to their relatives and brothers and sisters in the North. And so it's just exciting. It's a part of the story that I've been covering, the political side, obviously, but this part of the story is so encouraging. It's so heartening. When you have problems in one area and you just focus on the problems in that area, when you can find some good news in another area, especially good news that lasts into eternity, it's so wonderful to be able to say, oh, you know what? Yes, we have really just the first tiny little step taken between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. And, you know, the attempt, it's an attempt at normalizing the relations and opening the diplomatic channels. And then you have the people, 24 million North Koreans who are really slaves. They have no real autonomy or control over their own lives, and they don't have enough food, and they don't have electricity. And I mean, it's just like, you know, the worst of the worst for people like us who were living in modern America. But their spiritual condition is an even bigger issue, because no matter how you're living here on this earth, the Bible promises us that we will be in heaven. You know, after we're done working here, we get to go to heaven as Christians. But those who don't have salvation in Jesus Christ don't have that assurance. And so what a horrible thing to know that you're, number one, living in a, you know, hermit kingdom and a dictatorship. And you're basically a slave. And then after living that life here on earth, you've not yet experienced the saving grace of Jesus Christ. You've not heard the gospel to go off into eternity, eternally separated from God. The South Koreans do not want that for the North Koreans. And so that's why they're working so hard, not just to walk out their own faith and to go out into the nations all over the world, missionaries evangelizing for Jesus Christ, but that they have this aggressive church planting. It's a plan that they've created, and they want to have the opportunity to implement it in North Korea. And so, you know, when you're looking at the here, where's some good news we can find, you have to dig and scrape and try to find it. And then here it is. I felt like this was icing on the cake for everything that we saw. And I have really tempered my expectations. And also I hold a very, you know, just kind of regular feelings, not super excited, definitely not pessimistic. I'm just in the middle. And that's because the Kim family has spent so many decades, you know, hoodwinking presidents of the United States, saying that they'll denuclearize, or they'll do this, or they'll do that. They'll stop the gulags. And the reality is they don't. And so we don't know what they're going to do in response to President Trump, but we do at least have this bit of good news that the Christians in South Korea are anxiously awaiting their opportunity to engage with their brothers and sisters in the North and to share the good news of Jesus Christ with them. And that can make all of us hopeful and lift us up, lift up our spirits, and make our hearts sing a little bit, knowing that they're so prepared and that they're just waiting. You know, that's, you know, sometimes we see when you're expecting and you're waiting and you're prepared is when God moves. So let's hope and pray for that. So today on the rest of the program, we're going to talk about California voting on splitting their state. That's going to be next segment. And then in the last segment of the show, we're going to dip into Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders is experiencing a little bit of pushback from the Democrats. They expect him to declare himself a Democrat if he wants to run again on their party ticket. No more of this kind of half in, half out stuff. But is it too late? You can call in. I'd love to talk to you about this if you'd like to weigh in on whether or not it's too late for the Democrats to reclaim their party. 888-589-8840. He actually is in an interview here in this clip that we're going to play in the third segment, where he talks about how ideas that were considered radical before have now been mainstreamed. And I would prefer that that's not the truth. Like my hope was that when he appeared and started talking about national political aspirations on the presidential ticket, that Democrats would say, you know, it's fine to caucus with you. You're an independent, but you say you're a democratic socialist, but we can't have any of that in our party. And I know so many Democrats that I would encounter and ask you, do you really believe in Bernie Sanders' socialism? And they'd say, oh, no, socialism, that's not American. So there are plenty of Democrats out there who have not bought into Bernie Sanders' vision for the world and his radical views, making America more like socialist countries. But so many millennials have. They see him as a friendly grandfatherly type. And it's a sad situation when you think about, there used to be some honor in it. And now it's just how radical can we be? How fringe can we be? How can we mainstream fringe ideas? And so that's we'll get into that a little bit more. We have some audio from him in his interview. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of stars who, one is from Hollywood, Amy Adams, and the other is Gayle King, who is a serious news person. She's on in the morning. I believe she's on the Today Show. She actually made some pretty interesting statements about how the Me Too movement has morphed into basically the death penalty for men. A single accusation can completely kill their careers, and that she wants to see, she says, not all of the allegations that are being made are on par. There's a difference between rape and sexual harassment. There's a difference between someone regretting having a relationship, a physical relationship with someone, and it being non-consensual. And it's really interesting to see her say that. She rounds out her comments by asking for more attention to be paid to Black Lives Matter and the police brutality issue that the NFL is mired in, which completely negate her common sense comments that she made about Me Too. So she's in the news for that today. And then you have Amy Adams. So she's actually getting called out over at the Daily Wire because her reaction to the gender pay issue is she's not in line with everyone else in Hollywood. So you've got most of the people in Hollywood, either the men are, continually self-flogging themselves about being paid too much. The women are complaining that they're not being paid on par with the men. And there are demonstrable instances of people not receiving equal pay for work that looks very similar. And so Hollywood is a different beast. When men and women make identical work choices, women actually edge men out in pay. But when women make the choices that, statistically speaking, women are more prone to make, as in taking time off to start a family, to raise a baby into preschool before coming back to work full time, working part time, job sharing, that type of stuff. Women and men who are similarly educated and have similar work histories, the women are paid less because they're actually working fewer hours, or they have spent fewer years working in their career field cumulatively, full-time work, than their male counterparts. So when you equalize everything out, there is no gender pay gap. And that has been the constant refrain from people on the right. And it makes it sound like we just don't care about women, but it's not caring about women. It's caring about facts. That's what matters. So here you have a lot of people who've really been interested in finding out what Amy Adams thinks about this. So the UK Telegraph actually interviewed award-winning actress Amy Adams and asked why she hadn't been yelling about the gender pay gap issue. They're like, we haven't heard much from you on it. What's your take? Now, what's interesting about this is that's something that leftists love to do. I mean, you name it. They're like, I'm sorry. Have you been eating at Chick-fil-A? You heard about Jack, the owner of Twitter, tweeting out that he'd gotten a boost for eating at Chick-fil-A and paying with their app. And everybody came for him so hard that he actually had to apologize for eating good chicken. Now, this is fantastic free advertising for Chick-fil-A. I don't mind telling you, they are getting some wonderful free advertising out of this because Jack has an amazing Twitter following. And I don't understand how, if you've ever smelled Chick-fil-A and then eaten it, how you could possibly care what the owner thinks about traditional marriage. You should just be in there getting that chicken when it's time. I don't advise eating there multiple times a week because it can really get, you'll pack on the pounds because it's delicious. It's like Turkish delight chicken, where you take one bite and you're like, oh, I'll have some more of that. I'll have some more of that. Before you know it, you're, laid over on the couch and you can barely move. So there's this tendency by leftists to basically take your temperature. We know you're famous and we know you're on the left, but you haven't said anything about X. When are you going to start joining us and clamoring for restitution, fixing, utopia, whatever on X? When they asked her about it, here's what she said. Everyone wanted me to talk about how I felt about it, gender pay gap, but I want to fight for people outside our industry. So to come out and look ungrateful about what I'm paid as an actress just didn't seem right. So she's referencing the pay disparity between she and Jennifer Lawrence and their male American Hustle co-stars, which was exposed in the 2014 Sony hack. Lawrence took a different route than Adams, publicly complaining about the allegedly sexist disparity every chance she could get. But Adams said she'd rather focus on others outside of the glitzy industry like waitresses and teachers. I do believe in equal pay, but let's start with our teachers. Let's get waiters paid the minimum wage. That's what's great about what's happening with Time's Up. We're starting to have bigger conversations. Now, Amy Adams is someone that, if I could, I'd love to go out to coffee with her to one of my favorite little coffee shops here around in these parts and sit down with her and talk to her about that sentence. First of all, waiters and waitresses don't want to make minimum wage because you can earn $20 to $25 an hour if you're a good waiter or waitress, because the tips make up for the fact that you're paid $2.50 an hour or $3.50 an hour. The tips are the goal in waitressing, and so people who don't work in that industry don't understand that. The other thing is that I already explained, the gender pay gap is a myth when you factor in the behaviors of women in the workplace. Amy Adams should know that too. Anyway. So we'll be right back after these messages.
With the help of two outstanding Christian therapists, Walt embraced a relationship with Jesus Christ and experienced true healing. He then wanted to go back to his original birth gender as a male, and now is happily married and has been for over 20 years. But if the California bill now becomes law, Walt would not be able to receive life-saving counseling for people who struggle with gender confusion. If AB 2943 were in place, then Walt would have become one of the 40% who committed suicide after this tragic surgery. This bill is dangerous and will harm people. Please pray for Liberty Counsel as we continue to monitor it, and will file suit if it is passed. Visit lc.org. That's lc.org.
The American Family Association invites you to a very special gathering of AFA friends from across America this fall at the Big Cedar Lodge in the Ozarks. The AFA retreat will be a relaxing time of fellowship and inspiration. Speakers include Sandy Rios, Dr. Ray Pritchard, Todd Starnes, Abraham Hamilton III, and Ed Vitagliano, and Dennis Jernigan will lead us in worship. Experience all of this in a beautiful setting that dates back to the 1920s, built originally to be a wilderness retreat for a prominent Missouri family. We hope you'll join us October 8th through the 11th at the rustic Big Cedar Lodge just south of Branson on Table Rock Lake. It promises to be a refreshing time of worship, teaching, fellowship, and fun. To register or for more information, visit afafoundation.net. Seating is limited, so register today. Hope to see you there.
Washington Watch advances a culture where human life is valued and religious liberty thrives.
Hello, this is Tony Perkins, host of Washington Watch, right here on the American Family Radio Network, inviting you to join us each afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Time for the latest from our nation's capital on what is happening as it pertains to faith, family, and freedom. You'll hear from policymakers, congressional leaders, and others every day on AFR.
So they asked me to enter my email address, and the next thing I know, I start getting emails from companies I never even knew existed. What's up with that?
Here at the American Family Association, you have our word that we won't give away, sell, or lease your email address to any other organization or company. We're thankful when you take the time to subscribe to AFA Action Alerts, 1 Million Moms, Engage Magazine, or any of our other online newsletters.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
A proposal to split California into 3 states qualifies for the November ballot. Eric Richards joins us with more. Eric, what in the world does this mean?
You know what? I think we'll just have to see. Wait until November, right? Good morning, Christina. Well, this proposal officially qualified yesterday with more than 402,000 signatures, surpassing the amount required by state law. Now, here's how it would work. Under the proposal, each state would have 12 to 13 million people. Let's start out with California. You see right here, this would include 6 counties like LA, Santa Barbara, and Monterey, just to name a few. Southern California would include 12 counties, with San Diego being one of them. Fresno and Kern counties would also be in that mix. And finally, you have Northern California, which would have 40 counties. Tim Draper does propose this initiative, saying the split would allow states like communities to make better and more sensible decisions for its citizens, like school systems, high taxes, and deteriorating infrastructure. However, critics have slammed this proposal, noting the split would cost billions of tax dollars Now get this, if the measure is approved by voters, the governor will transfer the notice of state approval to Congress, which will ultimately vote to ratify the creation of the new state structure. So, keep in mind, California Secretary of State Alex Padilla will still have to certify the initiative for the November 6th ballot. He has until June 28th to do so. So 3 states, Christina? I don't know.
I'm not sure if Congress would approve or if it would even pass. So
a lot of mixed feelings, but
yes.
Again, 402,000 signatures already.
All right, Eric. Thank you. We'll see.
Well, welcome back to the Hamilton Corner with Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right, and it's my pleasure to be with you guys today. I want to say hi to everyone who's listening on terrestrial radio all over the American Family Radio Network, and then, of course, those who are tuning in on the live streams to YouTube and Facebook. I've shared it over on my page, so hey, everybody. Good to be with you again for another hour of radio. You just were listening to some audio from a news bit on California on splitting the state, to basically better represent the people who live there. And I'm sorry, we were a little bit of I couldn't hear the music, and so I kind of overran the break there. If you called in and I missed you, please call back. I'll definitely get to you, 888-589-8840. I have to say, this is something that I would love for it to have happened 20 years ago. It happening now is very unlikely. Even if the people of California were to vote it in, the Democrats would find a way to stop it in Congress because it messes with their electoral college votes. They'd love to get the extra seats in the Senate, but they do not want to give up the electoral college votes. So probably not going to happen. I also want to get to this app, and the chances of you having the La Liga Spanish Soccer League official app might be pretty slim, but the story of what this app is doing with the microphone on their Android users' phones is something that we all need to be aware of because this capability exists. So getting in a little bit into the technical, but we all have cell phones, right? So, you give your apps permissions through your device for those apps to access parts of your phone. So maybe your messages, your emails, you might give the app access to your contact list. These are all permissions that you give the app in the course of, first of all, purchasing it or downloading it for free, and then activating it. You give it permissions to do things. Well, there's a new permission that's coming out on Google Play. 10 million people have this app on their phone already. It's the official app for the Spanish Soccer League. The name of it is La Liga. It was recently updated to seek access to users' microphone and GPS settings. If you grant that access, the app processes audio snippets in an attempt to identify public venues that broadcast soccer games without a license. So what they're trying to do is protect their property, which is the game. They don't want people using their phones to live stream the game to people who haven't paid to see it. The La Liga officials issued a statement saying that the functionality was added last Friday and is enabled only after a user clicks yes to an Android dialog asking if the app can access the mic and geolocation of the device. The statement says the audio is used solely to identify establishments that broadcast games without a license and that the app takes special precautions to prevent it from spying on end users. I trust that about as much as I trust that a pig is going to fly through that window right there. So according to the statement, which was translated by Google, they've implemented the technical measures to protect user privacy if you authorize us to use this functionality. Then they list a bunch of measures that are supposed to protect you. But it's hard to evaluate the claims that they're making because they're saying collected audio is converted into a binary format that can't be converted back into sound. That alone should be enough reason for users to reject this permission. Even if the app uses a cryptographic hash or some other means to ensure that stored or transmitted audio fragments can't be abused by company insiders or hackers, which is a major hypothetical, there are reasons users should reject this permission. For one, allowing an app to collect the IP address, unique app ID, binary representation of audio, and the time the audio was converted could provide a fair amount of information over time about a user. For another, end users frequenting local bars and restaurants shouldn't be put in the position of policing the copyrights of sports leagues, particularly with an app that uses processed audio from their omnipresent iPhone or Android phone. So they reached out to Google, a spokesman, to try to get a comment from them, and they didn't have anything for them. They referred the Ars Technica reporter back to their policy, which is binding on all apps available in the Play marketplace. Among other things, their binding policy from Google requires that apps prominently disclose any collection of personal and sensitive user data. Such apps must also present a consent dialogue in a clear and unambiguous way. The policy also bars deceptive behavior. Now, the problem that I have with this is that we've just recently seen another story about how Facebook shared user data with Chinese companies that have been accused of espionage, hacking, etc. This is information that was shared that they were aware of when Mark Zuckerberg was called on the carpet in the UK and in front of the EU and also in front of our Congress. When he went to testify, he was asked if there had been any other breaches besides the Cambridge Analytica, any other data sharing that was outside of the consent decree that he signed back in 2011 after a previous data breach. Now, suffice it to say, I'm not going to go through the entire timeline, but on my program, I covered this a couple months ago about how this is a repetitive behavior by Mark Zuckerberg. He has over and over again issued apologies, put out full-page ads in, the Washington Post, places like that, where he's apologized for inadvertently, somehow, yada, 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 sharing data of users. So if you think that the Facebook is a norm as opposed to an outlier, and they are definitely a norm. The gold standard now is Facebook and Google and Amazon. Amazon in the marketplace, obviously, but online social media. I mean, between Google is responsible for over 75% of all the advertising in this country right now, online social media. Facebook has billions of users, and they have the largest market share in the space on online social media. Not just because they're Facebook, but because they purchase any company that presents a credible competition to them. They've purchased WhatsApp, they've purchased Instagram, anything that's fun that people want to do instead of Facebook, they just buy it. So even though you're not doing Facebook, you're still doing Facebook. Because that was my thing. I loved Instagram. I'm like, Instagram's not Facebook. I love it. Well, now it is. It's Facebook. So if Facebook is the norm, which we know that it is, and their behavior is the norm, then you can't trust these companies to abide by what they say are their end user agreements. The end user agreements are really only for us to govern our behavior. Behind the scenes, they're doing whatever they want, like the way that Twitter employees have been caught by Project Veritas admitting that they have read people's messages, and how frequently they read the direct messages of Twitter users and see nude pictures, sexually explicit material, even between husbands and wives, how the direct messages on Facebook have all been read by Facebook employees, sometimes shared and saved on private servers in their homes where they've sent themselves the information so they could save it and look at it again. This is activity that tells me, at least as a skeptic, I'm an online social media user, but I'm also a skeptic, that if they're asking for your permission to use your microphone, whether you're aware of it or not, to basically activate your microphone from a remote location and record snippets of the information, which they claim they will use a cryptographic hash on. I mean, raise your hand if you know what that is. Then it also tells me that just as often as a cryptographic hash is used, there will be times where the cryptographic hash is not used and data will not be converted into inaudible bits. It will be the actual sounds of you having a private conversation with a member of your family or anything else that you might do where your phone is within earshot. And so, again, we have to use caution. We're not like hermits. We're not going to retreat from social media or cease to use cell phones, but we have to be smart about how we use them. One of the things that I notice people doing now is they will take their phone and power it down, but the microphone can be activated if your phone is powered down, if someone has that capability. So they leave the phone in a room or they are not if they're going to have a private conversation. Now, this is something, obviously, 300 some odd million Americans, not every one of our conversations is going to be worth someone listening into, but these are the kind of precautions we have to take because our trust has been violated over and over and over again by the social media giants. And I have no assurance, there's been nothing that's been said that makes me feel as if these are in the past. These are what some of them are doing and the way some of them are operating. And instead of acting as if we're unaware of what they've done, we have to govern ourselves accordingly. So my thought on this story is that the La Liga app, they're the first ones to come out and verify for us that they can do this, that they have this capability. So the question is, how many other apps have this capability, and how many other apps will now that it's reported on Ars Technica, now that La Liga is asking for this permission through a dialog box for people who have downloaded their app, and that's 10 million plus people, how many other apps will now request the same permission for whatever reason they may feel, validates the request? That's the question. So, I'm cautiously, no good. That's no good for me. The other big news today was that President Pence spoke at the Southern Baptist Convention, and apparently there were some pastors who felt that since Vice President Pence is on one side of the political aisle, they shouldn't have him out to speak. And the bigger story beyond Vice President Pence, actually, they were like, no, he's going to speak. We understand your objection, but he's coming. And he spoke to a group of more than 9,000 delegates, by the way, 9,000 delegates at the Southern Baptist Convention's denominational annual meeting. There's this really, it's been a kind of a tough fight over the new head of the Southern Baptist Convention. And the new person who's been elected is J.D. Greer. He's president, and he's moving forward in this kind of Me Too age where there's been some allegations that things that were preached from the previous president's pulpit were against women, in that they kind of basically minimized incidences of abuse and created an atmosphere where women didn't have any place to go if they were experiencing physical or emotional abuse, and that the Bible was used to validate that. And so he's no longer, the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the new gentleman is talking about diversity and I really have, when I hear that term, diversity, so when it first came out, diversity meant it's all the same people, just some people may be, permanently tanned, some people may be moderately permanently tanned, and some people may need to tan. But generally speaking, it's all people believing the same things, just adding in more options for people to come in who may not be represented. And now diversity means it's strictly sexual diversity. And so when I hear him using that term, of course, he may be using the previous term, talking about bringing in more women and bringing in more people of color. But the Bible doesn't talk about diversity in that way. There is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free. We're all one in Jesus Christ. And I think the obsession, it's like an infection that passes from one person to another, and it spreads like wildfire, which is that we feel like we need to use the same buzzwords and do the same things and believe the same things as people in the secular world, because somehow, we're all guilty of the same things. And we are all guilty. We're all sinners. But God's grace provides for us to understand ourselves through the descriptions he gives us in the Bible, which is we are one body. And so just like fingernails are totally different from eyes and ears are totally different from shins, we as people are different from one another, but we all form the body of Christ, and we all have a function and a reason for being, and God blesses us when we operate within that. So instead of saying we need more ears, we need to just respect each other and love each other with the love of Christ. All right, when we get back, we'll have the final segment of the Hamilton Corner with your guest host, Stacy on the right. Stay right there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, we only go to the Holy Land once a year, and that's in March. Last year, we filled up several months in advance. So if you want to go in March of 2019, it's time to look at the details. You can get a brochure from us at 800-FAMILIES, 1-800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your telephone number, or go to twholyland.com, twholyland.com. It's going to be a wonderful time in Israel. We'll go to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the holy city of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Masada, the Dead Sea, and on the list goes. If you'd like to go with us in March of 2019, all the information is available at twholyland.com. Order a brochure by calling 800-FAMILIES, option 5.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you did make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes with news and commentary next. The other day, I was on a packed subway car heading into the Fox News corner of the world. At one stop, a mother boarded the train, feeding a baby in one hand while juggling a toddler and a giant baby stroller with the other. I watched in disgust as grown men slumped in their seats, refusing to budge. So I stepped in, offered to look after the giant baby stroller while another passenger assisted with the toddler. But not a single man offered up his seat. It was inconsiderate, downright shameful. Look, I'm old school. I was raised to say yes, ma'am, and hold the door open for ladies. I know it may not be politically correct. I know some will call me a sexist pig. Others will say I'm infected with toxic masculinity. But it still does not sway my opinion that when a lady steps into a packed subway car, the men who are sitting should stand up and offer their seat. It's the manly thing to do, America. I'm Todd Starnes.
The Hamilton Corner podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We are obviously in a pivotal and unprecedented moment in American history. And the fights that we are waging are not just for ourselves. More importantly, they are for our kids, our grandchildren, and the future of this planet. And if anybody in this room, and I know it's not the case here, but anybody in this country who thinks that now is the time to throw your hands up and give up, you are dead wrong. Now is the time more than ever to stand up, fight back.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, filling in for Abraham Hamilton III. And it's my pleasure to be with you. I am, flabbergasted that this man is able to draw huge crowds and get people to come and listen to him when he's talking about this radical socialistic stuff that's so un-American and is so demonstrably a vehicle for failure for anybody who buys into it. But he wasn't done. He was giving kudos out because he feels like, rightly so, he has been instrumental in moving forward this agenda that makes it possible for radical ideas to be treated as mainstream type stuff. And so let's listen to number 4.
And I want to thank all of the groups here because whether you know it or not, you have helped transform this country in so many ways. A few years ago, just a few years ago, and I want you to think about it, many of the ideas that we talked about were thought to be fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas. Well, you know what? Because of your efforts, those ideas are now mainstream American ideas.
And you hear people screaming for socialized medicine, which we see in Canada has Canadians. They don't just pop south of the border to buy their milk and cheese. They come down here for testing. They need a CT. The wait is 9 months. They have fewer machines in each province, which is their equivalent of a state, than we have right here in St. Louis in one hospital. One of our hospital towers here in St. Louis has more CT machines that were created and put into use within the past 10 years. So newer machines. We have more in one tower in one hospital. And there are 8 or 9 hospitals here in St. Louis. And we're not even a top 20 town anymore. We're number 22 market-wise. Then there is in a province in Canada. The wait to get a CT is 8, 9 months. Now, to put that in perspective, first of all, what is a CT? If you've never had one, it looks like a spaceship. There's a bed that you lie down on, and the bed slides in and out of this tube. The tube is basically a camera that takes pictures of you 360 degrees. So you can have 2 types of imaging done in this one type of machine, one of which is where they actually put an IV in and they inject you with what's called contrast medium. Contrast medium is a mixture of iodine and some other things. When it goes into your bloodstream, it colors all of your organs so that the machine can take thousands of pictures in every rotation and can recreate a 3D image of your internal organs and the space between them. So if you have an abscess, a cyst, a growth, if something is going on with your digestive system and there's anything that can be happening with you, this machine takes the picture. And then I've seen this. I've seen the doctor actually manipulate the image. They can use the mouse and flip it around. They have this cutout of whatever part of your body the machine took pictures of. And it can be your limb, it can be your leg, it could be your abdomen, it could be your chest. And the other way that they can take pictures is without the contrast medium. It's an X-ray picture that it takes of your internal organs, and then you flip that around. For most people, when a doctor says, I need you to get a CT scan, that means that their conventional means of figuring out what's wrong with you, blood work, blood tests, an X-ray, those are not working for them. What they need is a picture of your internal organs so they can pinpoint what the problem is, because they're not just going to go in for exploratory surgery. That's a terrible idea. So this gives them a way of seeing, oh, now I see your kidney it's being compressed by a fluid collection in your abdomen. We have to do something about this. We need to drain that fluid collection. And then they will go forward and give you a CT afterwards to see if they did what they were attempting to do. If you don't get a CT immediately, I mean, I've been to the hospital where they've said, we need you to get a CT, and they actually sent me down the hallway and I got one the same day. I've heard of people being in the emergency room and getting a CT and actually getting admitted to that same hospital and having surgery because the CT showed something that had to be taken care of right then. So imagine if you have some symptoms, you go into the doctor and they say, we need you to get a CT. And they call over and the next available CT for you is 9 months away. What are you going to do in between now and then if you have an abscess in your abdomen and it's infected? They can put you on antibiotics, but those antibiotics are not going to last you for 9 months. These are life or death situations that are brought about by single-payer healthcare, socialized medicine. And what I just explained to you is just one example of the many failings of single-payer healthcare. And who is a huge proponent of single-payer healthcare? Bernie Sanders. And everyone who claims the mantle of democratic socialism. So it's not about, whether or not I like Bernie Sanders or not. Who cares? Who cares how I feel about him? It's just irrelevant. What I care about is the fact that family members lose family members, moms lose daughters, and sons. People die when we take on other countries' forms of government and things like that instead of sticking to what we have, which is the best of the best. We have a representative republic. We have representative rule. And we have private health care. Can the system be fixed so it's better? Can we make improvements? Can we shore up places where there are gaps and people are falling between the cracks? Absolutely. But looking to countries that are socialist in nature for answers to our problems will only bring their problems to us. There won't be any solutions. So it's interesting that he is so happy about turning what he calls the radical into the mainstream, because there's something else that he's turned that was radical into now being mainstream. His balance sheet. He was not a wealthy man. Bernie Sanders is someone who's never actually held like a 9-to-5 job in the private sector. He's only been a politician, and before that he was a writer of things that aren't fit to be spoken here on this good Christian radio. I can't even read the stories he used to write and little essays and stuff because they're vulgar and profane. And that's what he did before he decided to go into politics. So for someone who's never held a 9-to-5, dude is doing pretty well. He's got a place in D.C., he's got a lake house, and he's got the house that he's owned with his wife for quite some time. And so for someone who's a socialist Democrat, he definitely likes money. He likes the accumulation of wealth. He likes private property, but he likes socialism for everybody else. So he's right that he's mainstreamed a bunch of radical ideas. The question is, why? And how do we get people to wake up to the fact that he's only mainstreaming them for you? He's not interested in having socialized medicine for himself. Now that he's worth more than $1 million, he'll never have to experience that. Because money is how elected officials insulate themselves from the decisions that they make that negatively impact their constituents and other people. Because I'm not a constituent of Bernie Sanders. But if he were able to ram through some socialized medicine that forced me into a single-payer system, then I would be the recipient of his radical/mainstream ideas. And I would not be happy about it. Coincidentally, in Canada, they also have a private healthcare system that sprung up in response to the socialized medicine. So the people who are in the private healthcare system pay twice. Their taxes pay for the socialized medicine, but when they really need something done, they go into the private healthcare system to get whatever it is that they can't get through socialized medicine. It's the same in England. And the easiest thing for them, if they really want to trust what they're getting, is to just travel south of the border for the Canadians. They just come down to America and get some of our fantastic health care and then travel back up there with, loads of milk and cheese in their trunk as well, in their little coolers. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy that is going on there. And then I'm sure you heard about Ireland pivoting over to pro-life, about Ireland approving the referendum that removed abortion from being illegal from their constitution. Was a real blow for the pro-life movement to see that happen. And now in Argentina, they're actually voting to legalize abortion as well. And their vote will carry weight for all of Latin America, according to the Washington Times. So in Buenos Aires, they had a vote today on legalizing abortions in Argentina, which was highly anticipated because of the ripple effect that it could have across Latin America. Lawmakers in the lower house of Congress are expected to vote in the wee hours of the morning on the bill that would allow abortions until the 14th week of pregnancy. A Tuesday vote count showed 117 lawmakers who are favoring the measure, 119 opposed, and 19 undecided. If subsequently approved by the Senate, President Mauricio Macri, despite being an abortion opponent, is expected to sign the bill into law. Now, this is an instance where he should go with his personal beliefs, and he should not sign it into law. Now, they've had months of national debate, and they've had pro-life groups, which were backed by influential Catholic Church against the Women's Rights Coalition, seeking to make Argentina the first major Latin American country to allow all abortions, which would be provided free of charge in public hospitals. Now, here's what's so dastardly about that. Decades ago, Russia had a population that was on par with our own here in the U.S. They legalized abortion in Russia. It was communist Russia back then. And they did the same thing that Argentina's planning on doing here. They made abortion on demand free of charge, no questions asked, at government hospitals. Women in Russia had so many abortions that now their birth rate is so low that they have reversed their policy. Meanwhile, after decades of this activity, their culture has changed from one where children are regularly seen and heard and are, prioritized and are kind of, a goal and something that people aspire to now they're a burden. It's something that, you only want to have one child. You really don't want to have more than one, yada, yada, yada. And that societal shift has detrimentally impacted Russia because Putin wouldn't have to pour the majority of their GDP into the military so that he could front like they're somehow on par with the United States if his population was on par with ours. But they're not. Their population is around 150 million. We are at 314 to 320 million, depending on who you ask and whether or not you include our illegal immigrant population. Now, the caveat for us is that 40 to 50 million of that is from immigration because we take in 1 million or so people a year through lawful immigration and then the other numbers of people who are here illegally. But even if you take them away, our population is much larger than theirs because we don't have abortion on demand paid for by the government. And our birth rate is still higher, although it has declined significantly over the past 10 years. So when the Bible says the fruit of the womb is God's reward and that our quivers should be full, it's not a joke. It's not just some, suggestion. Having children and having a culture that respects not just life, but children and families, intact traditional families, and the having of more than one or two children. And, because I actually heard someone who's an amazing Christian witness talking about how you have to be careful how many kids you have because each kid costs around $400,000 to raise. Well, I think you could probably find thousands of evangelical families who have 4 and 5 kids who would tell you that's absolutely not true. It doesn't cost $400,000 to raise a child. Those are choices that you make that bring the number up to that level. But it doesn't matter if it costs $10 million per child. If you believe that God provides for you and that he's your provider and that he's your source, and you feel that the desire of your heart is to have 3 or 4 children, you're married, you're working, your spouse is willing, then you're to be fruitful and multiply. And that attitude that children are expensive and you shouldn't have so many of them and 1 or 2 only, and they're, you really have to be able to provide the best of the best of the best of everything for them, flies in the face of the reality, which is big families are happy. Big families are God's plan for us. So, of course, people should do whatever they feel called to do, and you should pray over your actions, but don't be like Russia. And for goodness sakes, I hope Argentina won't be like Russia, even though that looks like the path that they're headed on. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. God bless. And have a fantastic evening.
All right, Stacey, have a good one.
Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.